Good afternoon and welcome, and thank you for joining us for our webinar. Something that we're holding actually is part of Totem's commitment to diversity, equality and inclusion. Totem is a business. We specialise in recruiting professional services staff, business services staff into professional services. My name is Carolyn Beckford-Balogan, and I specialise in recruiting finance operation roles in professional services. And I will be holding the discussion today. And what we'd like to talk about is how Black professionals navigate the world of business services. And joining us today to share their experiences, provide career advice, and revealing the support that most help them succeed, we have Natasha Oo, Head of Business Finance at Herbert Smith Freehills. We have Justin Githion, Senior Recruitment Manager at Slaughter & May. And we have Ijoma Hunter, Head of Business Development for Africa at Dentons. So welcome and thank you for joining me and agreeing to be part of this panel. For everyone else, actually, there will be an opportunity for you to post questions to the panel. But can I ask that you actually do this in the Q&A section and not in the chat, because I don't want to miss any questions that you may come up with. So that would be really, really useful. So why are we having this discussion? Well, I was really keen to have this discussion because my background is that I have worked in recruitment for 20 years. But prior to working in recruitment, I did a degree in psychology, I worked in marketing, and I actively chose recruitment as a career because it was just something I wanted to do. I wanted to work in an industry where I could dictate what I was earning, but I also wanted to work with people. So I know a bit of a rare breed, but it's something I chose to do. And over the last 20 years, I've always specialised in recruiting finance personnel into financial services, media, and now professional services. Also, outside of work, I've been involved in coaching and mentoring young Black professionals for many years. And I used to be qualified as a personal performance coach with NLP. And I just feel very lucky to be working in the industry at this pivotal time when companies are prepared to be open about actually asking for candidates from a diverse background. And we at Totem, something that we've actually experienced is huge instances of clients insisting on us providing diverse shortlists, like I've never seen before. And also the creation of heads of diversity positions in many, many law firms, small, medium and large. And it's made me think, well, there are actually very, very, very successful Black professionals already in this area and in the area that we recruit into business services. And it would be great to have a conversation with them and actually understand a bit about their journey, how you got to where you got to and what actually helped you along the way. So I'd like to turn it over to the panel now to tell us a bit more about them and how they got to where they got to. So if we start with Justin.
Hi, yeah, very happy to, and thanks for inviting me along. I think it's a great opportunity to talk to people about how you navigate the course of the world of business services. My background actually is very different to a lot of people that sort of come into recruitment because I've taken a journey and almost done full circle. So I started off as a barrister and got called to the bar back in 2003. And obviously that's a very different job to working in recruitment. But what I wanted to do was use the skills I developed during my time of qualification and then subsequently practice and get into a more commercial environment, because actually what I found when I started working as a barrister is that it's a pretty solitary profession. And actually I wanted to be around more people. I wanted to be a bit more commercially focused. And I moved down to London from Wales originally. So I pivoted quite successfully from legal into legal recruitment. And actually, one of the keys, I think, about making a transition from one part of your career to another is actually having those transferable skills. So using those legal skills, I was attracted to a legal recruitment agency, and I worked in an agency for about 6 years. And it was only really when one of my clients asked me if I would go and set up an in-house legal recruitment function for them that I actually moved to an in-house role. And that was back in 2014. So it's been a while since then, 7 or 8 years actually coming up. I now am the senior recruitment manager at Slaughter and May. What does that mean? It means that basically on a day-to-day basis, I'm responsible for all recruitment apart from trainee recruitment that comes into the firm. And I've got a team that work for me that deal with all of our business services, all of our legal recruitment, secretarial, etc. So great job. I'm also a 30% club mentor, which is something I've just started this year, and really enjoying that experience. And I mentor a few people here internally too. So it's been a really interesting journey for me, and I'm looking forward to sharing a bit more about it with everyone on this call.
Thank you, Justin. Ijoma.
Thank you, Carolyn, and hello everyone. It's a pleasure to meet you, and it's great to be with you, and happy Black History Month. So as Carolyn mentioned, I am the head of business development and special projects for Dentons. My regional focus is Africa. For those of you that haven't heard of Dentons, we are the world's largest law firm. And I say that as a little dig to Justin and Natasha, a little bit of law firm rivalry there. We have offices in 80 countries, 12 of which are in Africa. I studied law at university. If there are any Nigerians on the call, you will know that your parents decide that there are only 3 professions that you can possibly go for. You either become a doctor, an accountant, or a lawyer. So I chose the lawyer route. I studied law at Nottingham Trent University. And the real reason I studied law, apart from not wanting to let my parents down, is because I loved LA Law and Ally McBeal. And those of you that know those shows will know I'm kind of revealing my age there, but for those of you that don't, think Suits, but back in the day. And I loved the degree, and I loved people. And so when I did my work experience, I found that was quite different to what I'd seen on TV. But I liked the environment. It's extremely challenging, extremely intellectual. No day is ever the same. So I pivoted into marketing in law firms. And I started my career at Norton Rose back when you could smoke in your office and partners had a key to their very own bathroom. Since then, I've worked at CMS Cameron McKenna, and now, of course, I am at Denton. So I've been in professional services for roughly 20 years. And professional services marketing has evolved so much, and it continues to evolve. And I am a huge fan of business services in the professional services space, the way we are able to position ourselves as trusted advisors, as coaches, and I'm sure Justin and Natasha will agree, sometimes we are therapists to the lawyers as well. I think there is no field like it at all. I am passionate about mentoring young boys. I have a son who is 9 years old. I grew up in a family of women. So my son is one of the first, and being a mother to a young Black boy is the most wonderful thing in the world, but it also opens your eyes to some of the challenges that you're not aware of. So I mentor them, and my hope is that through this conversation and through some of the other conversations I have, we begin to make a difference. So it's a pleasure to meet you all.
Oh, thank you, Ijoma. Natasha.
Hi, everybody. So Ijoma, my mother-in-law is Nigerian and clearly very liberal, because she told her son there were 4 options, not just 3. He could be an engineer should he want to. So there you go. So hi, everybody. A pleasure to be here. As Carolyn's already said, my name is Natasha, and I am an accountant and currently working as the head of business finance for Herbert Smith Freehills. I've worked in the legal industry for over 20 years. Never thought it'd be this long. And unusually for an accountant, I qualified into a law firm. So most accountants will qualify into accounting businesses, but I actually qualified into a law firm. I didn't always want to be an accountant. In fact, I wanted to be a career politician and really genuinely thought by now I'd be running the country. please don't judge me. I was an 8-year-old Thatcherite. I have asked for forgiveness many times over the years, but that was my dream. I was going to be a Black Thatcher. I fell into accounting because whilst I was in university, I became really passionate about international development. And my lecturer had suggested that I should secure a skill and a profession and then go into international development. I, for no apparent reason, landed on accounting, but actually fell in love with it and really enjoyed the law firm environment. I'd say law firms are very Marmite. You really do love it or hate it. But I think the others would attest to the fact that actually one of the great things about working in a law firm is just the intellectual rigor and challenge, being surrounded by very bright people who always challenge you to be better. And so I've stayed. I think it's also an exciting time to be part of a law firm, actually. So they are very traditional, very old-fashioned, and because of all the social things that are going on, actually they're hitting a point of reckoning, like many other firms. And so a bit like Ijoma, I am very passionate and motivated to drive change, largely because I am a mother of 2 girls. And I have to be able to look them in the eye and say, I've done everything I possibly can to make the world a better place for you guys as you step forward into your careers. And so I've come to that stage where I realize I do have a voice and I want to use it for change. And so, yeah, that's a bit about me. So back to you, Caroline.
Thank you, all of you. I think the first thing that comes up for me is a question actually to Justin and Ijoma. I mean, you both mentioned that you obviously studied law. What advantages has that given you in your desired career paths, like as in not being lawyers? How has it helped you?
Well, for me, it's definitely given a degree of credibility within the law firm environment that I think otherwise I certainly wouldn't have had. And actually, as a result of that, I think, converse lack of credibility, one might struggle actually to get on with and engage with and actually sort of be taken seriously in some instances by a partnership, especially when you get to a position where you're advising on key strategic hires, as often is the case for my particular role. When you're giving opinion and driving insight on candidates, for example, that we're assessing, they will want to know, and they really appreciate actually that you can see it from the lawyer's perspective, i.e. theirs, but also from the recruiter's perspective. And that extra dimension combined with the sort of the similarity that they would see in you it's just been very, very useful for me. I think it's been instrumental, in fact, in enabling me to progress through the career choice that I've made.
Justin, I completely agree with you. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Justin, I completely agree with you about the credibility point. I think because the legal profession is so traditional, and if you compare it to other professions, so if you compare it to the financial services sector, for example, the legal profession hasn't evolved as quickly as others have. And so a significant amount of weight is put towards your qualifications, is put towards where you went to university. And I think certainly for me in marketing, being able to say that I have an LLB, particularly given the region that I focus on, does make a difference. But also, just touching on what Justin said, there is a way of thinking, there is a way of approaching things methodically that lawyers are taught when they study and when they work in that environment. And if you can apply that, if you understand the way they think, if you use that competitive advantage, you can turn conversations around. So yeah, just fully supporting everything Justin has said.
And I know that we've all sort of like talked about a bit about sort of like mentoring and coaching, and Ijoma, you spoke about mentoring and mentoring your son, but I'm just wondering, as Black professionals, what role has mentoring played in your career to date?
So I'm a huge believer and fan of mentors. Yeah, so someone in a position with experience who can offer you advice and support, whether that's someone in your personal life, you know, it could be your netball coach, or whether it is someone in your organization that might be found for you through a formal program. And I think Justin can definitely speak a lot more to that. But the other piece of the story for me, and something I wish I had learned a lot earlier in my career, is that as well as having a mentor, it is key that you have a sponsor. You know, when we think about the difference between doing our jobs and developing our careers and our brand, that is where a sponsor comes in. So what do I mean by sponsor? I'm talking about someone who is quite senior in your organization and who has some kind of investment in your career success. So this person will have agency. You know, they will be extremely influential and they have a seat at the table. So they can directly influence your career. And most importantly, I found, and I welcome what Natasha says about this as well, that your sponsors generally tend to like you. And in most instances, they spot you before you spot them.
Right.
Sometimes you can have a sponsor and not realize until you've moved on that that person was your sponsor. You know, and I'd wish I'd learned that being really good at what you do it's just not enough. That's not what is going to ultimately propel you and help you develop your career and get to the next level. But I can see Justin and Natasha are nodding, Carolyn, so maybe I'll pause here.
But I just wanted to ask you, Jama, because you mentioned this, just so everyone knows, what is it that a sponsor does for you that a mentor wouldn't? Just so people would actually know.
Yeah, no. So when I think about my personal life, so I mentioned that your mentor can be someone outside of your organization or in your organization. So one of the best mentors that I had was actually my hairdresser. And I don't know whether it's just because we had one-on-one time together, but he was my best mentor. And I could talk to him about situations at work, you know, and he would give me some thoughts on how to approach them. But my sponsor was the person that saw the value that I could add before I even realized it, brought that out in me and championed me at the table. And when I say at the table, that was the person who put my name in the hat to work on certain projects. Not because I necessarily knew exactly what I was doing all the time, but because those projects would develop me and raise my profile across the rest of the firm to position me for where he felt I could get to. So that's why, you know, I feel that we should definitely leave this conversation with a clear understanding of the values that a mentor brings and the values that a sponsor brings, because I don't think we talk about sponsors enough. So, you know, hands down, my greatest sponsor right now in the position that I'm in is my CEO. And I'm quite blessed, because the reality is sometimes your manager isn't necessarily your sponsor. But, you know, I've sort of hit the bullseye there in that he is.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Natasha, I think you wanted to add something.
I was just going to pick up on two of the themes that Ijoma raised. I think for me personally, I've had many mentors over the years, and so recognizing that I've needed and will continue to need different things at different stages of my career. So I'm a bit of a mentor floozy, not totally just had one. And so that's been really important. And I know when I started out on a mentoring journey, I found myself getting frustrated because I'd feel, okay, this mentor's taking me to a particular point and almost feeling a bit stuck. And then realizing actually it's okay to have different mentors at different points. And just picking up on the point around sponsorship, I completely agree, Ijoma. Many of my sponsors have been slightly accidental, and I hadn't always realized it until later. But I think the key thing is understanding that those relationships are highly relational, basically, that you have to build trust. And I think when I think back to my sponsors over the years, they were people that trusted me. They trusted that wherever I was thrown or whatever environment I was put in, that I would always do my best to deliver. And like Ijoma said, it doesn't mean that I had all the skills. And in fact, most of the time I didn't, because it was developmental, but I had built enough trust with them that they knew I would always turn up. And so that just feels key, actually building those points of trust throughout the organization so that people can put your name forward.
I think that's really key, because you can't just rock up in a new organization and expect to have a sponsor. And so you do need to be, shock horror, pretty good at what you do in order to get sponsors, because if people don't see that quality in you, they're not going to be willing to sponsor you, because it's their neck on the line, it's their reputation. And what they're effectively doing is using their currency, as far as their reputation is concerned, to help propel you. So you've got to.
So Justin, can I ask you, how do you get spotted by a potential sponsor? So I'm enthusiastic, I'm keen, I want to get on in the organisation. How do you get yourself spotted?
I think it can be as basic as doing a really good job day in, day out, delivering on your promises, and becoming a person that people can, as Natasha said, throw anything at and they know will deliver. And that's really key, because you're demonstrating your value, you're reliable, your commitment, etc. But if you want to go the extra mile, going the extra mile in your day-to-day job is also going to make a huge difference, because if you stand out and you're the person that's taking on board the extra project or helping somebody out of a tight spot and delivering still great results, as well as doing your day job really well, then that's what's going to make you stand out. You have to differentiate yourself. You have to find a way of saying, look, I'm worth championing, I'm worth sponsoring, because I'm a bit different to all these other people, and you should be sponsoring me first and not the others. So it's really about differentiating yourself and making yourself stand out.
Yeah. Okay.
Is it okay if I just add to what Justin has said? That piece about going the extra mile is really important. That piece about, when you're asked to do something, doing it with, I know this is going to sound corny, but doing it with joy. Don't be the person that's sitting back thinking, God, I've got so much else to do. Just do it with joy. And understanding the nuance between doing a good job and making an impact, because there really is a difference. And that's the difference between your job and your career. That's the difference between your name being on a list just because you're part of a team, but people knowing who you are and being able to describe you as, as Natasha said, someone that you can trust. As Justin said, someone that goes the extra mile, someone that is a joy to work with. Oh yeah, I'd really like to have this person on this project.
Yeah, and I can concur with that, being in recruitment, and you can see that the candidates that do well and have the examples of where they've done well in organisations are the ones that have done things outside of their job scope, and it's about the way that they've actually approached it. And it's interesting, and it draws on, some of what you were saying about, your family background. One thing that I've actually found is that my father always said to me, whatever you do it to your fullest. So even if you're sort of like, cleaning toilets or whatever your job is, you do it to your fullest and you make sure that you are the best toilet attendant there is. And I often wondered, why am I actually getting picked for things other than my colleagues? And I think that is probably the thing, is that is the way that I approach things. So that's interesting to hear that that's just, one of the great approaches to get yourself spotted as a sponsor. So without a background in law, one thing I just want to mention is that I know that Justin and Ijoma mentioned that your background in law and how it helped you your career. Without that background in law, what else do you think a young Black professional can do to build gravitas and be taken seriously within a law firm? Because it's a highly competitive environment. What can they do?
I'll jump in here just because I'm the one without a law background. So actually Justin and Ijoma are absolutely right that law firms are really focused on qualifications and background. They just are, and it's not worth pretending that they're not. But equally, what I would say is when I took on the job, so I'm not Oxbridge, I'm the first in my family to have gone to university. And when I took on the job, I took over from somebody that was Oxbridge privately educated. So clearly it is possible. And that point of credibility that both of them mentioned is absolutely key. You can't get away from it. So I think there are some basic things, which is make sure the basics are done well. So an analogy I was given quite early in my career is that with lawyers and partners, if they if they see a branch on a tree is broken, they'll decide the whole tree is dead. So if you give them a report and it doesn't add up properly, that's it. You've lost them. So take your time and make sure that the basics are done well. Also, spending time investing in understanding their context. It's their business, it's their world. There are stresses that will keep many of these guys up at night. And part of our responsibility as business services is being able to help them navigate through the complexity of the business world. Spend time understanding the business of law, because then you're able to articulate things to them that they will find helpful. Don't bluff, don't try and black your way through, they will see through it. So what I'm really saying is your career, your responsibility, invest in yourself, make sure that you are spending time really understanding the context and do the basics very, very well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with all of that stuff. But actually, I think it's a very important question. It's also really important to realize that actually there is increasing recognition that you don't need to have a legal background to work in business services within a law firm. And I can give you a very, very good recent example of this, because I'm very, very happy to say that this firm has just been shortlisted, so nominated and shortlisted for an award for our Business Development Academy. And that program, it was specifically evolved because we know that there is a skills shortage in BD within law firms, in fact, right across the board. And we wanted to find a way of growing our own. We also wanted to find a way of attracting candidates who wouldn't necessarily have, really thought about a career in law. So, we advertised very, very broadly. We didn't look at anything to do with people's qualifications when they applied. We didn't look at anything to do with their background whatsoever. We simply asked them 2 questions that we thought were going to be directly relevant to someone's performance in the role. And that's because we wanted lateral thinkers and we wanted people that, had a diversity of thought. So we ran that process completely blind, and we've ended up with 3 individuals who would never have considered a career within the legal sector. They're all very interested in the world of commerce and business. 3 women, 1 from an ethnic minority background, I'm very pleased to say as well. And, we're now up for an award for Best Talent and Inclusion Initiative at the Lawyer Awards, which is coming up just next month. So, that is a case in point. You don't have to have that background in law. In fact, quite obviously now, firms like ours are looking for people that don't have that, because it gives the diversity of thought that actually, if you get groupthink together with loads of lawyers in a room, can be dangerous. So, we've got to relate to our clients, and I think having a broad skill set, people from a variety of backgrounds, is really, really important.
Yeah.
Sorry, was just going to support everything that Natasha and Justin had said. And in particular, now when I think about the team of professionals that I work with, they've got such a varied background. We have a lady who's an architect. We have a lady who's joined us from a radio broadcasting background, because I feel you can always teach someone the technicalities of the role in business development and marketing, but you can't teach someone enthusiasm. You can't teach someone curiosity. You can't teach someone how to be creative. In other words, if one door is closed, where else are you going to go to get the answer that you need? If the partner's busy and can't respond to a question on a pitch, go to the senior associate. Just that kind of thinking and willingness to do what it takes to get the job done. You can't teach that. Somebody has that in them, and that is not exclusive to any university, any college, or any background. It's something you either have or you don't have.
Yeah, a couple of good points there, actually. Just something I wanted to go back and pick up on in terms of what Natasha said. And I remember you said this as well in the conversation that we had previously, what you just saying about you have to be committed to your own career. It's important to understand how law firms work. But you also mentioned as well about being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Can you say more about that for me?
Yes, there's I guess there's many meanings to that statement. So one is, whilst we're all pushing for greater diversity and greater equity, actually you step into a law firm and there are going to be many occasions where you may be the only one that looks like you in any environment. You're going to have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. But also I think more importantly, and we've touched on it already throughout this conversation, that in order to progress, you do have to be visible, you do have to turn up, you do have to be present. And that means sometimes putting your hand up to do a task that you know you can only really do 3 or 4 of the things on that 10 list, but you also recognize it's a huge development point, or you're really, really busy and actually ideally I just really like to go home at 5:30 this week, and recognize actually, but taking on that extra task is going to be really important, not just for my visibility, but actually it's going to give me different skills. And so it's one of the things I always say to my eldest daughter, that actually, if you want to do well, and those people that do well have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because actually it's the point of discomfort that you're learning something new. So if you're always comfortable, you're just doing the same things over and over again, and you've got stuck and there's no way you can progress or do better. And so, yeah, that's a real key thing, a real key learning for me.
No, and I think that's a really, really great point. I mean, I went to a school where, you know, my family were the only people of colour in that school. So I learnt through my education about being uncomfortable, you know, all the time in those settings. But that's something that I think other people that may have grown up in sort of like more diverse or gone to education in more diverse environments may not realise that it's okay to feel uncomfortable in these spaces when you go to work. That's actually normal, and still to just perform through that. So I think that's really great advice. And I just wanted to pick up and go back to something that Justin said. I mean, great about your, you know, your Best Talent Inclusion Award. I think that's tremendous. And I like the way that work that you're doing with blind CVs as well. But what I want to know is will you as a business be introducing blind CVs to other parts of the business? And you talked about sort of like recruitment being, you know, an integral stage to D&I. But whose responsibility is it for driving the agenda forward?
Yeah, very good questions both. And yeah, we're delighted to have been nominated and shortlisted for the award. Yeah, will we be rolling blind recruitment out more broadly? I think the answer in short is yes, we will be. How quickly we do it and exactly where we focus our efforts in that regard, that remains to be seen. But what we've done is we've tried something for the first time, and by trying it, it's yielded fantastic results. So why wouldn't we do it again? It would be kind of crazy for us not to look at expanding it, because we have gender balance targets here at the firm. We have targets in relation to ethnicity, and this initiative has very clearly, if you look at the applicants we would typically get for a similar sort of graduate type role, has very, very clearly changed the sort of applicants that we're getting. And we had, I think, 77% of the applicants for the position were female applicants, which is hugely skewed. And actually, you have to ask the question, well, why would a blind process do that? And we think it's probably because we're asking 2 very plain questions. There's word out there that some psychologists, I'm sure, came up with at some point, saying that women typically, for example, are less likely to apply for a job if they don't tick as many of the items on the job description, whereas a man will say, well, I've got 6 out of 10 of those, so I'm going to go for it. And actually, there are so many biases and so many things out there, but if it's worked, which it has, we will definitely try and roll it out more widely. In terms of the agenda of D&I, who drives it forwards, I'm very fortunate because I work in recruitment, and that means that I get to have a direct impact on who we get through the door. And that means that my team, and I drill it down into them, and they are all absolutely subscribers to this, they really appreciate the value of having a diverse shortlist of candidates. Having that diversity is hugely important for our clients. We're talking about lawyers, because we need to be able to reflect what our clients look like if we're doing a pitch for a panel or something like that. But actually, it's not just it's not just about our D&I and responsible business team and people who are diversity professionals in inverted commas being responsible for. It's the responsibility of everyone that works at a firm. If you see something that doesn't look right, you should challenge it. Well, that's my view. Some people don't feel comfortable about making a direct challenge, but it's really, really important that everyone takes responsibility for their own part in this. And certainly, I've got a fortunate position. We can directly influence it, but if we all play our part, we'll see a much quicker change, I'd say.
Can I just jump in there? I completely 100% agree with Justin, in particular that last point, that actually I think it is the responsibility of everybody to turn up and be present. So whilst the structural kind of cultural stuff tends to sit at the senior leaders door, our ability to be present and to turn up and to challenge when appropriate is important. But I think there's a real nuance there, and just I think it is important to be clear that whilst I think it's the organizations has a responsibility to help drive the change agenda, it's still our individual responsibility to manage our careers. And I know I work with some of the younger people coming into our organization who sometimes get those two things slightly mixed up. So there's almost a waiting for someone to do this for me, because there is a massive change agenda, and just actually feel that nuance just needs to be clear, that yes, there is a lot to be done in terms of improving diversity and equality, but we cannot get away from the fact that our careers are our responsibilities.
Yeah.
Hi, Carolyn. Sorry, just a couple of points. Agreeing with Natasha and Justin, and I just wanted to say, Justin said that it's everybody's responsibility, and he recognises that he is in a position to challenge. And it can be difficult when you first start out in your career to do that. But what you can do is identify a Justin or a Natasha or somebody else and just have that conversation with them. And sometimes having the conversation is enough. What, Natasha, Justin, or I do with it is down to us. But make your voice heard, make your opinion known.
No, that's great. Okay, so we have a few questions already, but please do continue to post your questions to the Q&A. And so first question is, do you think mentors need to have the same background?
Sorry, you can probably tell from the way I'm nodding my head. No, I don't think they do need to have the same background as you at all. I think in a way that's almost missing the value that a mentor can bring to the table, because in a way you almost want someone who's got a different background to you, because they're bringing that diversity of their own to the conversation. I think what's more important is having a mentor that hears what you're saying and that you can connect with, so you can receive the benefits of that relationship.
Anyone else?
I think that's right. It's for me, there needs to be an affinity, but you don't need to be that similar, because if you don't have any affinity with the individual that you're being mentored by, then it's very unlikely that you'll develop a relationship which is significantly close enough to be able to share the honest feedback that I think is really truly required for a successful mentoring relationship. So once you've actually got past that affinity and you actually like the person, that can help, then I think, somebody that's actually quite different to you can actually offer a very, very different perspective, and that in itself is very useful. We're talking about, this Black History Month, we're thinking about diversity more generally. Diversity of thought is one of the most important things. So having a different perspective can often be very, very valuable.
Okay, and how did you find your mentors? Did you go through, seek a formal, I know, Ijoma, you've already mentioned it was your hairdresser, but it was one of your mentors, but has any of you gone to a formal organisation, or have you asked people formally to be your mentors, or have they just been people that you can, rely on for solid advice?
I think I've had both. So I have gone through a finance organisation, being an accountant, and found a mentor. And actually that probably was the least successful. And the ones that have been much more successful have been the ones that have been a bit more organic, at least for me. because I think, as I said before, I've needed different people at different stages of my career to give me different things. And so generally, my mentors have emerged through work, through relationships, often looking up in the organization and seeing people that I admire, largely their leadership styles are the things that matter to me. But also outside of the organization, like Joma's mentioned. So I think I've done both, but the ones that have been much more successful have been the ones that have been more organic than through official channels.
Okay. And have you found people being quite responsive when you've asked them to be your mentor?
Yes, one of the things I realize about senior people is it's a little bit of a stroke of an ego when you say, will you be my mentor? I have not met anybody yet that said no. So generally people have always been receptive, but I think there's also that piece, if you're looking for someone internally and it's organic, there's still that bit around trust. So people are much more willing to make the sacrifice and support you if they can see you have a track record. And so again, that bit just has been important for me.
Okay, so another question from our audience is, have any of you faced barriers to your progression that you think was different to others who were, for example, in a white majority or seen others in that position?
I'm going to shut up in a minute, but I'll jump in. It's a tale of two halves for me. So I would say that I didn't feel any barriers, to be completely open and honest. So I've had one or two negative, slightly ignorant experiences, but I never felt I was held back in my career development because of my race. However, I now look back and look at the journey of my career and think, actually, there are things that were more challenging because of the intersection between my race and my class. So I'm in a law firm. Law firms are desperately largely middle-class environments. I am not from a middle-class background. And so there were some challenges around building relationships because I just felt like we have nothing in common. I remember social, so being called into my boss's office and told, well, you need to do more socials. It's important for your career, it's important for your visibility, you need to do more socials. I hated them because I hated getting ready in the toilets with all my other colleagues, pulling out my very black makeup and not being able to straighten my hair with flat irons because I had extensions in. And so whilst it wasn't overt, I think there were cultural things that did make it harder over the years, but I can honestly say I do not feel that I have been overlooked because of my color, but that's my unique experience.
I have had a similar experience to Natasha, and I remember when I first started in marketing, it's not just that there wasn't anyone else that looked like me. It is the fact that there was a particular type at the time at said firm. And that type was tall, slender, blonde, and wore black skirt suits. It was that specific. I didn't tick any of those boxes at all. And what I would say now is that even where I am, and my regional focus is Africa, doesn't mean that my face necessarily fits. For a long period of time, I was the only woman in most of the meetings. I was, in some cases, in some countries, the only Black person in the room across Africa. So when Natasha mentioned being uncomfortable, being comfortable being uncomfortable, I think that's something that we have to be able to carry throughout our careers and learn from, so that when we're in a similar position or situation, we can draw on the strengths, or the lessons learned previously. So like Natasha, I don't think there has been any overt discrimination, but there are differences. And the more Justins and Natashas and Carolyns we have, I think we can mitigate that a bit. We can diversify the influencers, the decision makers, and the environments that we work in, so we don't feel so different, and so that we introduce more commonalities.
Great. Justin, did you have anything to add to that?
Really to add, I mean, yeah, I think the benefit of hindsight is a wonderful thing, and yeah, it's often the case that when we look back from our slightly more fortunate positions as our more fortunate selves, you look back and think, actually, probably that wasn't right. And you know, I have an example from my career, which was very early on in my career, just after I moved from private practice into an in-house role, actually. And you know, it wasn't so much a barrier to my progression, it was just a massive affront to my sensibilities at the time. And this isn't, by the way, one of those things that I only realized after looking back, because it was very, very clearly blatant outward racism. And you know, there was it was an employment tribunal as a result, and I came out of it financially very well off, because you know, it is still the case, unfortunately, that there will, yeah, and this wasn't a law firm environment, as I said, it was a corporate environment, but there are still instances of, you know, outward, very clear, blatant racism, and they do occur in the corporate world, and dare I say, even though I've had no direct experience of it, in the legal world every day. And you know, those sorts of injustices, of course, you know, they have to be directly challenged. And yeah, I think it's worth saying that, in my view, those instances are really, really sort of petering out and disappearing. It's very rare to hear about anything like that. But I'm talking about, you know, when I first qualified back in 2003, so it's a fairly long time ago. You know, we're not that far away from that, though, if you think about it. You know, 20 years hence, yeah, I'm sure those instances are still out there. So really important to challenge. What I did about that was, obviously, apart from suing them, was, you know, just take it in my stride, move on and find actually, you know, something better for me. I didn't let it get me down. And actually, you can't, because, you know, I knew I was as good as everybody else there, and there was absolutely no reason or rationale for those comments to be made. So yeah, that's a personal example, but it didn't hold me back. It's important to challenge.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
Carolyn,
Another question. Sorry, go on.
No, it's just I think we'd actually be interested to hear from you as well, whether you've had any of those experiences, or whether anything that we've said on that particular point resonates with you.
I mean, look, definitely. I mean, I think for me, I think this is where having mentors has really helped me, because I don't know how many people that actually have them in the recruitment sector, but I don't think I would have been able to get through my career without them. And a lot of that, I think they helped me with like gaining the social capital that I needed to progress in my career that wasn't necessarily visible to me. Like, one of my eldest sisters has been like an amazing mentor, and probably my first, who then encouraged me to have like seek out people in a more structured way to get what I needed. I have sort of like experienced sort of, you know, blatant sort of like racism, and, you know, racism within recruitment, and heard it in different environments, thankfully not in this environment that I work in. That I wouldn't say has stopped me in my career, but it has stopped me wanting to progress with those particular firms. So maybe that has stopped me in my career, because you don't want to be around that. And just seeking organisations that have a greater commitment to fairness in terms of the way they treat their candidates, and in terms of the way that they sort of like recruit their clients. So yeah, unfortunately, I have experienced it. I don't feel that it's actually stopped me in my tracks, but I do feel that it's stopped me going along certain career routes where I've just thought, you know, I'm quite happy to just stay as a consultant. And it takes a lot of strength, I think. And I think none of us have actually spoken about that. We talk about it like, yeah, you've experienced it, we do this, but it takes a lot of inner strength to actually face that and then continue on in your chosen career. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation, because it is important that people know that it is out there, but it doesn't need to necessarily stop you. And just because you are a successful Black professional, it doesn't mean that you've not experienced it, or you've ignored it, or you've stepped over it. It is also because you've dealt it and you're dealing with it and you move on. So that's been my experience. Thank you for asking. I mean, one of the things actually that I just wanted to bring up in sort of relationship to that, because we've talked about sort of like blind CVs, we've talked about help internally, but you know, you can't create something that's sort of like not necessarily there. And very often we are being asked for these diverse shortlists, you know, from recruitment consultants, I mean, from clients, but, you know, the candidates aren't there, they're not there. And then we're asked to think more broadly. But if you're not thinking more broadly internally, it's really hard for us to get that candidate to interview stage. And I know that one of the initiatives that Justin was very sort of like pivotal in was this, this race fairness committee. And I'd just like to hear briefly more about that and what difference you actually all think that's really going to make practically.
Yeah, well, the race fairness commitment was one of the first things I did actually, upon joining Slaughter and Mabel back in June of last year. And it's no big secret that, you know, big law is not the most diverse profession when it comes to ethnicity. I mean, the very fact we're having this conversation, and Totem, as you know, an organisation that, you know, provides professionals to professional services firms, is a case in point. You know, that it exists, that there's an issue there. So, you know, we have to look at different ways of addressing it. And actually, one of the key considerations for us is that, you know, you can't necessarily just change the makeup of your staff overnight, but we as recruiters have a gateway. You know, we can effectively, you know, really, I suppose, regulate the flow of people into the business and what those people look like. And that's in terms of, you know, their educational background, in terms of their ethnicity, in terms of their sexuality, everything. You know, we have a say in terms of who gets through. Now, ethnicity is a very obvious thing. It's one of those things that when you walk into a room, you can't necessarily hide. You know, if you're a black person, you walk into a room, they see it immediately. And we know for a fact that there are issues. The fact we have gender balance initiatives and targets, you know, again, case in point. So how do we regulate that with our suppliers? Well, we have a race fairness commitment, which we asked them to sign a pledge initially, and that was that they basically had the same values as us, that they would still be subscribing to the same theories and philosophies and processes, and that all of those things would be, you know, with a view to having diverse shortlists of candidates and providing, you know, equity and equality for Black applicants. What we've now done is gone a step further, and it's about a year actually since you know, the original race fairness commitment was signed. I think you may well be seeing some more in the press about it shortly, but we've taken it a step further now by auditing our suppliers and actually making our decisions in terms of who to supply to us. So, you know, recruiters have to provide us with details of how diverse their shortlists have been, etc. And if they can't prove why they haven't provided a diverse shortlist of candidates, i.e. that there's a good reason for it, then they won't be supplying to us anymore. And that's how sort of very, very clearly sort of committed we are to this sort of cause. And actually, if we
sorry to butt in, Justin. We are sort of like having to wind up now because we're coming towards sadly coming towards the end of the session. But that, you know, is a great place to sort of like end. And it will be really interesting to find out a year from now, because I know that initiative was started after the George Floyd murder last year, and it will be interesting to find out a year on from that next year how far you've got with that, and hopefully it will be more than just a tick boxing exercise and cause us to have real changes in our sector. So yeah, I'm sorry to have to depart from the meeting, and it's been really interesting listening to you all, and thank you so much for being part of the discussion and part of the conversation. And I'd like to thank all the panel for giving up their precious time to take part, and also for everyone else that's actually been listening. And also what we are going to do at Totem, and along with our panel members, we are going to offer the opportunity for people to receive mentoring from the panel or someone at Totem. And if this is of interest to you, please do send in your CV and why you believe you would be a good candidate for mentoring to mentoring@totempartners.com. But don't worry if you didn't get that, because we'll be sending it all out on an email as well. So thank you very much for your time, and goodbye.
Bye.